It's just hard to even take seriously because it's just so correct.
Yeah, I mean, and it's.
We're not live yet. We'll let you know when we are, we are live.
Oh, we're live?
Oh, they can hear. Okay.
Okay, we're live.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can hear you. Hi,
Here we
everyone.
We are just,
Oh,
Dr. Folsom.
It's working, but you could stop sharing your screen.
All right. Good afternoon. It is currently 5:07 p.m. on August 6, 2025. And this District of Columbia State Board of Education working session is now called to order. The working session is being streamed live on the State Board's YouTube page for members of the public to view. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Executive Director is online activity, so we'll have Deputy Director call the roll.
Representative Best,
Present.
Representative Chang. Representative Colson.
Present.
Representative Goulet. Representative Henderson.
Present.
Representative Johnson Law.
Good evening and present.
Representative Thompson.
Present.
Representative Williams.
President.
President Patterson.
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Going to start at this time. I'll have the leadership report. The leadership report should be in your materials with you. Let's see. In there. Yes, it is. It will be a brief one because I hope everybody had the opportunity to enjoy some time off when meetings weren't being held during the month of July. So there were not a whole bunch of meetings that were held. So in this particular leadership report, we did not meet with DME in the month of July, nor did we meet with the chairman in the month of July. But we did meet with OSSI on October 16th. The update from OSSI is Dr. Mitchell and team has advised SBOE leadership that they will be pushing back their timeline on the graduation requirement. The rationale for this timeline, this new timeline, was to ensure that they could review and take into account new feedback that they have received on the area of special education diploma and options for students with disability. Additionally, OSSI also wanted to build in time for internal review with the Deputy Mayor of Education, the Mayor, and others before their final proposal came to us. The new timeline to share the updated proposed graduation requirements with the State Board was by the end of September 2025 and present them at the October 2025 work meeting. Okay, so in regards, and other news, in regards to the high school graduation task force that we have, Dr. Mitchell also told us that she is looking forward to naming Dr. Jones to represent OSSI on that particular task force. And that's basically the update. I think right after that, I did send out an email to make sure that the committee who is over that were aware of that so that they can adjust their timeline accordingly with what's going on. Okay. State board representatives also will be receiving an email from me in regards to participation in evaluations that we discussed earlier of the the board appointed leaders of the SBOE, Busman office, and the office of student advocate. Please pay close attention to the email that you get. They're a little bit different for different people, so I'm sending out different email instructions for you guys. And please, if you're going to participate, meet the deadlines. In closing, I would like to reiterate to state board representatives to submit your request for constituency funds used. I know do that as fast as possible. Okay, if you have back to school activities that you're going to have that you would like to participate in, we're almost going to need those as soon as possible if you're going to meet the deadlines for your event. Most of the people have not spent down their money. I know a few have and have just a few $100 left, but a majority of the members still have their whole contingency fund sitting there. It's a great time to use it as we get ready to go back to school. I know there are a lot of children and activities that could probably use, your support. So please, at your earliest convenience, do so. Does any members have any questions for the leadership report?
Just to confirm, send those requests to Roma.
Yes. Any other questions? All right, I will now turn to our executive director Butler for her report. She is online virtually.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
And
Excellent. Good evening, members of the DC State Board of Education. Over the last month, the SBOE team has been finalizing the details for our move to our temporary office space. Our entire team will be relocating next Monday and Tuesday. We will resume full operations on Wednesday, August 13th, 2025. I want to welcome Katie Minkoff to the SBOE team officially. She joined us on July 14th and is coordinating our team's relocation to our temporary space. Welcome to the team, Katie. Under the guidance of Dr. Fleischer, we will host our second annual New Student Representative Orientation next week. We are excited to welcome students from Coolidge, Basis, School Without Walls, and Banneker as student representatives for the 2025-2026 school year. As we are preparing to launch this year's Student Advisory Committee, our team aims to get at least one student from each high school to participate this school year. Over the coming weeks in August, watch your emails for outreach from Dr. Fleischer as we engage high schools within your ward. In addition, the SBOE team received approval from the Office of Budget and Management for members to spend their constituent engagement funds. Please check your inboxes for instructions, some of which have already been shared by President Patterson, to submit your request. And within that email, it will tell you how much each person has left. As we prepare for the 2025-2026 school year, the SBOE team has some capacity to attend back-to-school events. If you have events happening in your ward, please email the details to the SBOE staff. We may not be able to make every event, but we will try to at least cover one event in each ward. Lastly, our budget and operations team is working to close out the budget and procurement obligations for fiscal year 2025 and plan our expenditures for fiscal year 2026. We need your help in considering and deciding how the board would like to allocate any funds. I'm requesting that each committee have their FY26 spending plans or suggestions to share with the full board at the October working session. This timeline and process aligns with the timing of the state board retreat and the beginning of fiscal year 2026. Please note that the SBOE staff will follow up, committee staff will follow up with specific instructions at your September committee meetings. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
thank you, Director. Are there any questions for the director?
Yeah, well, Director, with regards to the constituent funds, who should we look out for the email coming from? Or if it already landed in our inboxes, who would it have been from?
The latest email saying that you all have been approved has not been sent yet. I was supposed to send it before I got on the plane yesterday, and I did not. So it will come from me, but the request will go to Roma, as President Patterson stated.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for our director? All right, enjoy. I know you're away and you're with some great folks, family, so enjoy. We're now going to move our public meeting to panel discussion. As a reminder to members, the public meeting panel topic tracker is included in the weekly roundup email. That document is where members should enter their ideals. Tonight, we will discuss ideals for both September and October. Beginning with September, there are currently 3 topics in the tracker. Special Education Transition Services, high school, is a carryover from Representative Johnson Law. Discipline and Safety in Schools, which is a carryover topic from last month, proposed by our Ward Representative, Dr. Colson. And then there is another that I like, okay, believe, deep dive into mathematics, and it is from our director, Butler. So, are there any suggestions for anything else to be added to this list? And now we're talking about September current. Okay. Seeing no additions, let's hear from each person about their proposed ideas. I'm going to be coming to Representative Johnson Law from Ward 8.
Thanks, President Patterson. And just really quick, can you repeat it for me? It's a little hard to hear over here. Because I know I've been like harping on SPED. And so I know I broke it out into specific pieces and I want to make sure I'm clear.
Okay, it was special education transition services. And it was basically speaking about high schools is what I have here in my notes.
Got it. Okay. So I think this has been like a lingering conversation that we've been having over the last couple of months about, okay, when children with their transition planning and when it comes to RSA, when it comes to what children with disabilities are doing after, so post-secondary high school, if it's college, if it's career, if it's internship, apprenticeship, a combination of both, like, are we really doing a good job? And I think I was thinking about this when we were talking about the graduation requirements. How are we really transitioning our students? Now, I know I've been really harping on this, and so I am also I can also take this out of the queue, but I just wanted to for us to continue to really harp on this because it's important, especially as we're thinking about the grad requirements and especially as we're thinking about how are our kids transitioning out of the system. This is why I've been so adamant about us ensuring as we get our children have an opportunity or more opportunities, I should say, to be able to get a diploma. Because when they don't have a diploma, this transition that I'm speaking of when they're doing that post-secondary transition is a lot harder and a lot more difficult for them to be able to access opportunity. And so I think that's why I was like asking which one it was, because it was this is like part B of it. And so that's basically what it is. Any questions?
Are there any questions, Representative Johnson Law?
And hi, am I on the screen? I think I see myself.
Yes, ma'am, you are. And you put a good energy. Now I'm going to go to Representative Ward 4, Dr. Cole.
Yes, good evening, everyone again. So as we talked about previously, in the past, we know that our schools were a bit extreme with suspensions. And then we have a policy that looks at curtailing that and looking at more restorative approaches in response to infractions. And given all that is happening in the city, I think it is a peek into what we're dealing with in the school in terms of behavior. And I want us to look at this again to assess if we can be more helpful to schools, to principals, and to students who are in a learning setting that is being disrupted by discipline infractions and behaviors that exceed the realm of restorative justice and conversation. So I definitely still want to be mindful that we are not using suspension as a first response and an excessive response, but we've heard from testimonies from our constituents in previous meetings about egregious behaviors that have not received the proper response. And I think it's time that we look at that again. So that would be my proposal. But again, for September or October, I'm flexible on that, but definitely want to talk about this.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Cole?
Are we sending comment until after we hear from her?
Yeah, but if you have a clarified question,
No, no question, just thoughts on the matter, but thank you for proposing it.
I'll point that out for us afterwards as well. So now we're going to move to our Director Butler to talk about a deep dive into mathematics.
Sorry, LaJoy has raised her hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I don't know if she was,
Johnson Law, is that a leftover or is that a question for Dr. Colson?
No, you're fine. Thank you, President Patterson. For Representative Colson, and your analysis, especially in the school, are you seeing more children with IEPs being disciplined? Because I know when council did the disciplinary law, I think it was because of the over excessiveness and the overuse of disciplinary actions, especially when it came to special education children. I'm just wondering, like, are you seeing more children that have special education needs or need to be assessed, or, because I know it's weaved in there and I'm just wondering what you're thinking.
If I understand your question correctly, I would say the opposite in terms of how we're responding to students who have IEPs. I think that there is policy that protects them, that takes their diagnosis into consideration
The,
when
the manifestation reviews.
the manifestation, but that, well, I won't get into those details, but yes, manifestation as well. But I think that that is something that is considered when we look at discipline. So no, I don't think that there's an uptick in students receiving suspension or discipline. But what your question is, do you think that there are more students who have been diagnosed or given IEPs? I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly.
Because, so what I'm noticing is that there are some children who are in the middle of evaluation, right? And sometimes with children who may have a behavior concern and they have been identified, they are in the middle of the evaluation process, but they could still be experiencing disciplinary issues. And so it's like a twofer issue. It's like, okay, I'm being evaluated, but I might still be having issues. And am I getting it's called RTI, Response to Intervention Services, but am I still experiencing those issues? And if children already are identified, are schools really putting those manifestations in place, or are we still just disciplining more? And I was just wondering, like, that's my perspective, but I also know you have another perspective, and so I just wanted your take.
I would say it's not just schools working independently, there's schools working in concert with central office and also our system that we have in place. So we're making sure that we're adhering to policy and also those guardrails. So sometimes if there is a lax in judgment or perhaps understanding of policy, those guardrails kick in to help us better help the students.
Thank you.
I do want to say, since you, had comments, Representative Johnson was, since this law has been put in place, when David Russell was in place, I distinctly heard complaints from educators, from parents, mothers. I think we're at a point where we can look at a review. I think all policies, I don't think any policy is perfect, and that at some particular point you need to look and see. I believe it was labeled the Fair Access to School Act when it was put in place. That you have to look at a policy and see where we can make adjustments. I think we're being called to do so. I've had some experiences with it, both in my professional career and as a parent as well. And as you were stating, a lot of times we want to make sure that individuals with IEPs get what they need and are not being punished unjustly or disproportionately, but at the same time, that's not used as a reason not to do the appropriate things to safeguard other children. And I've seen it used where they don't do certain things to children with IEP, even if a child has 5 or 4, it's totally different because of the protection that they feel. And it's also a DCMR of how much you can do with them. They're the only protected constituency when it comes to that particular, when we're talking about discipline. So I look forward to talking about it more one way or the other, whether that's September, October, or something. So I appreciate you bringing it to this. I don't know if there's any other comments. Yes, Representative.
I have,
Question. I know that the committee, the student experience committee has done some looking at this issue. So Representative DeLay is not here to speak to that right now, but I know that they've looked into it, and I'm sure they would have something to contribute here. I don't know off the top of my head, something like that.
I'm coming to you, Representative Butler, in just a second, but I believe Vice President Lee have a comment. No. Okay. Director Butler, you had a comment, you have your hand raised.
yes, I had a question. I think mine is also along the lines of what Representative Henderson mentioned, because I think often, because a lot of the issues like compound or build on, there's like components. So I'm just wondering, like, is there also a space or have any of these topics been like assigned to a committee so that there's like a work could be done on it, whether it's a research report, because I feel like data like that or like a fuller plan around the whole thing um, would be super helpful because I think what we don't want to happen with something like discipline and safety is to have issues siloed to like only address one part, then not look at the data related to students with IEPs and those type of things, or then or not look at other subpopulations. And I feel like is there a fuller body of work that all encompasses this that a plan could be built around? But I don't know if Representative Goulet is on
I
site
could
yet.
I could jump in here. So I spoke with Representative Goulet last week. We didn't have our July meeting, but this did come up at the previous working session. So this came up during our planning meeting for our upcoming Student Experience and Engagement Committee, which will be next Wednesday. And you're welcome to come. Representative Colson, right now, we're down to Representatives Johnson Law and Representative Goulet, and we are also going to, during the student orientation, raise the different committees as well, so that in September, they could be joining those different committees to make sure that we have a quorum for those, but it will come up at next Wednesday's meeting, and I can share the Zoom link for that.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Flesh. Is there any other comments, questions?
I think Representative Chang maybe had something to add.
Representative Chang.
Is that in the chat?
Did you make it indicated?
His comment was if we're talking panels, he has one to add at the end.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Got it. I'll come back to you to add it in just a little bit, okay? But what I will say is, we're gonna come to you, Director Butler, let's talk about that.
Excellent. And so as the board is thinking about graduation requirements, I am constantly thinking about how do we make sure that you all have the best and fullest slate of information and so and also best practices. And having attended the ECS conference in July, I think there's like sort of a deeper conversation that has to happen that I want like the fuller board to hear around just what others are doing around those math requirements for graduation because I think they go hand in hand. Even the sets, because I think those are going to go hand in hand with updating any type of math standards, the recommendations from the math task force. But I also don't want the math task force to be the only input into that. I think that is one input. I think we should also be hearing from other state boards who have done this, adopted different graduation requirements over the last year or so. It is something that is happening all over the country. And there were some really great examples of how people are looking at the Algebra 2 and what that looks like and how they are counting and what they're not counting as math credits that I think could be very valuable as a deep dive into mathematics and graduation requirements so that every student sees themselves, not just students who are aspiring to go to a post-secondary institution. And so that would be my description of recommendation to really build out a panel that helps share those various perspectives and really does a deep dive that gives the board some meat to look at and how they've navigated the challenges. I think how they've navigated the engagement and challenges with the community and like school districts to get at that, what they put in for the graduation requirements for their particular state. I think will be a helpful conversation for the state board to be a part of.
Were there any questions for Director Butler? Clarify. Comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Are there outside of Algebra 2, are there other, and I know we're getting to like a broader share of the ECS experience later on tonight, but are there any other particular focus areas that you know of that directly connect with either the graduation requirements or something particular that's being talked about already with math in the district?
Well, I know some of the stuff the state board's already dug into. Almost every state that is redoing graduation requirement is looking at CTE or pathways in some way, shape, or form. So I know we've had a panel about that to dig into sort of how states are looking at that. States are looking at the science stuff also very different. I mean, I will tell you the fact that DC requires so much social studies is just a DC thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I do think we stand out in that way currently. Um, but those were just some of the notices. But those things were not as sort of large in discrepancies to sort of how different people are tackling the math, because it seems to be like, to me, this really the bridging of the gap is like, oh, everybody needs algebra 2, but do they? Do they all need algebra 2? Like what, where, and helping people see where those lines are and how some states have tackled where their constituents have advocated heavily for algebra 2, but sort of how they've created intentional pathways in algebra 2 to meet every student's needs and what those graduation requirements look like and how that process been like worked through. And then also just some other works. There are some national like state collectives that are like brainstorming on just math in general that, would love to hear the state board to hear how they work as a collective and they're getting best practices and what their thought is around the graduation requirements. But there were some other trends, but some of which the state board has already looked into. And I just think with the math recommendations from the task force coming out, it would be good to maybe even hear all those perspectives together so that you all can have, well, the board and the task force could have something to chew on as they begin to look at the recommendations.
First of all, are there any questions? Any other further question? I do want to say, Director Butler, in a roundabout way, are you asking that this be September, based on the timeline that Oscar will get back with us? Is that another consideration as you consider this particular one?
I mean, honestly, I think it's a matter of when it can fit in. I don't anticipate there being a decision on the, final sets of graduation requirements before December. But I do think it is a topic. With the recommendations not even being presented now until the October working session. This could be an October thing, it can be a November thing, but I do think it is a topic that the board should consider for a panel.
I just want to be clear on that because I know timelines are changing and we want to make sure if there's going to be, information that needs to be disseminated or discussed, that we do it in a timely manner. I'm also seeing something from, Representative,
She said she thinks it would be a helpful topic even before the graduation requirements.
Okay. All right.
Seems more like an introduction.
It comes on screen and then it goes off screen.
Yeah.
Right. I was trying to read it in real time. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Thompson. I'm reading what you said. Okay. And for those who are viewing and don't have answers, I don't know, Representative Thompson said, I think this will be helpful. Even before the recommendations are presented, it seems more like an introduction, that we haven't covered. So thank you. All right, now that we've discussed that topic, I'm going to turn to Representative from Ward 2, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you. I generally support first the focus. I mean, our focus this year really is on graduation requirements and this work, right? So as much as we can inform ourselves of the pieces of how to do that best, I'm very supportive of what Director Butler put forward. I also think that as the voice for our constituents, we should stay abreast on broader shifts that are coming, rather so we can be proactive rather than reactive. And so one of the things that I know little about and would like to better understand is the role, opportunity, challenges presented by vouchers in recent federal policy. What that means for how DC schools, public schools, can or can't utilize those, because my guess is that our local private schools will, and what that actually implies for us overall.
The way that I'm writing it down, Representative Chang, is that, the topic is about vouchers and local impact. So to speak.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
A legal research, a legal scholar, a policy researcher on the topic. I would love the chance to just ask questions about what the dynamics actually are.
So they've been there for quite some time, but never kind of promoted at this rate that we're seeing currently. So it's a good topic to kind of go back and discuss and kind of really understand how they play a part in the ecosystem. So thank you. Were there any questions for Representative Chang on this particular subject matter? Representative?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Chang, for raising that. I think it's important. How do you see it being, like, I know it's a broad national conversation, there's different things. How do you see it being particularly relevant to the district right now?
Well, one of the things that, from my understanding, is we need to select what pieces of it that we opt into. And I don't know if Aussie, my assumption is that Aussie would need to consider that, but there are plenty of things and plenty of funds also that are available for DC to access if we opt into certain things. And knowing what those are, right, I think is one thing. And understanding what it can be used for. I mean, it came up for me because it came to my attention that some other states are considering using some of the voucher money for training literacy coaches or using it for literacy coaches, right? And so I think, you know, with the literacy cap on, it piqued my interest in better understanding what else we could use it for, but then also politically what it means for us to say yes to it.
What I'm hearing both the political ramifications first and foremost, because again, we've had it there, and I don't think anyone truly has an understanding of how much the district spends on vouchers a year, how they're, you know, funneled through to different, you know, people who use those vouchers. I know I haven't looked at it for quite some time. And then if there's the opportunity to reallocate, so to speak, on how that's used, what I'm hearing. That be correct, Representative Chang?
It is indeed, yes.
All right. Any other questions for Representative Chang?
I wonder if this is, so this is Director Butler. I wonder if this is an opportunity also to have a joint conversation or a round table, maybe separately from a public meeting. I mean, that is obvious. I mean, we can still televise it and do all the things like you need to do. But I think there's just also like the way our panels are set up, they aren't very conducive to discussion and discovery and understanding oftentimes. And I just think this needs to be in addition to us finding out, but also a conversation with the other education players in DC, particularly that work at the district level.
I like it. And you know, I've said this before, but what you said concerns me, right? Because it's not conducive for us to actually learn anything. We should
Yeah.
set up different structures for the whole thing. I generally, again, still don't think that it makes sense to have it at our public meetings. In the structure that we have them in, I don't think it creates a lot of dynamism, and it does feel more like a lecture, which we can read, right? So I'm full support of that and want to acknowledge this broader comment you're making, which concerns me.
I like the collaboration and the insight on that. Deputy President kind of agreed with the suggestion that, Director Butler has put forward, so to speak, is like, Representative Chang, if it's okay with you, I'm not going to consider it as one of the topics for a panel, or start discussing how we would possibly have a round table around the subject, so we can be more educated and there's a dialogue back and forth. Would that be okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So now that we've heard the different proposals for next 2 months, September and October, we're going to start with September. And So I'd like to hit first, on the table, as was stated before, we have, special education transition services. I do want to note that Representative Johnson Law has stated that, you know, she's open to moving this around as needed because we've had a lot of focus on special education, and this was just a second part B, so to what she's been discussing, recently. We also have, discipline and safety in schools by Representative, Colson. And then we have, deeper dive into mathematics, um, with, Director Butler. So that being the case, I'm going to start with, for Representative Johnson Law, would you allow me to say that we will, at this particular time, kind of move, special education away for a little while right now? Is that okay?
Yes, sir. President Patterson, can I make a more of like a suggestion for that one?
Sure.
Maybe like when Aussie comes back, like with their recommendations, like maybe we can revisit this topic because it all goes hand in hand together. So maybe like could we move this to maybe like October or November or like after they give us the recommendations?
And I believe Representative Thompson also has a raised hand.
I was holding comments. I'm assuming that we're gonna discuss these like as a whole, because you asked if folks have questions. I didn't have any clarifying questions, but I would like to discuss the three. Not just that, because I do have some, well, actually technically the four, because I do have some thoughts about what it looks like to explore these things, whether they be as panels at public meetings or other parts of our work.
No problem. So what I will say is that we'll go straight into discussion, before we start taking the vote. So Representative Thompson, since your hand is already up and you've spoken, go right ahead.
Okay. I think that, well, I will say I am partial to us digging into the math in September, um, for a few different reasons. I don't think we have, in at least recent times, taken the time to delve into just the landscape around math and what's possible. I also think it relates to not just like the graduation requirements overall, but specifically areas where folks have had questions, whether it's the CTE or advanced pathways. And also, I don't feel that we've gotten um, at least been able to say, maybe I should put it like this. I will say I don't feel confident that I've been able to say, uh, keep the pulse of the math task force, nor do I think most people are paying the same amount of attention to math as they have literacy. I do think that, and I'm curious about how committees are. Um, Proposing dives into some of the other topics. Like I know that Representative Goulet uh, isn't here to weigh in right now, but that is a larger discussion that it seems to help. I'm glad that we are having some of that discussion in committee, but I don't know as a member, as far as weighing in on this, when would then be a good time for us to have a fuller discussion, or if there are other ways inside the committee, like if the committee wants to host a roundtable, if the committee wants to do other activities, um, and maybe that's something that can be covered during committee topics, or that's work like the how we project out our work could be covered at the retreat. But I would like to consider those things together. I would imagine that there are other avenues where we can explore what Representative Chang is suggesting. And I know Representative Chang's favorite thing is not meetings. And I appreciate that about him so much. But we have had other vehicles, for example, especially for learning, where we can do interagency, we can convene across agencies. For example, I can't remember what it was the DME did, but we had a closed session where we talked with the DME about some of the things they were proposing. I would also imagine if we did some type of panel around vouchers, there would be our own local and national political considerations to consider as far as just us picking up the conversation. And I do want us to be aware of and sensitive to that before we have any public conversations. Like I think sometimes like knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know is really important. And I would encourage us to reach out to the other education agencies to say, okay, like how do we talk across and maybe, doing some type of convening that is smaller around that topic where we can dive in and learn a bit more. And then finally, with the SPED topics, I we did not have a committee meeting in August, but I do want us, and we have had some conversations about what it looks like to explore the high school graduation requirement work, both for the task force and the committee. But I would like us to kind of discuss this in committee as far as how we are moving this work along. To many of the points raised around the topic Representative Chang brought up, as far as like what lends itself, like the interaction, the learning. And so I'm hoping that we can kind of dive into that and give maybe a clearer sense of how we come up with some broader deliverables around SPED planning and transition services across the task force, especially because I'm expecting we'll have some solid voices in the task force.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. And so, in the comments, what I'm hearing is basically you're kind of making a ploy for math to be September, as we're talking about September to be our topic. Would that be correct?
I am saying that we do. My push is for us to do math in September, but I'm also pushing for us to consider what other avenues that we can explore the other topics um, outside of just a committee meeting. I think our work is best accomplished when it is yes and sometimes I worry that we over emphasize the public meeting panels as like our work, and that is a part of our work. But we have a lot of different tools in our toolkit um, to be able to do great work.
Thank you. Are there other comments? We're in September that would like to make this part before we go to voting.
I just want to say briefly that thank you for sharing your perspective, Representative Thompson. I agree with most of what you just said. And I think it's very thoughtful in how this work lives and how we use different approaches for different issues. I do want to underscore, Representative Wilson, that I have heard considerable attention to the discipline issue in Ward 1, and just like consistency of enforcement, differences across charter and BCPS. And so I don't know if we're at a place where we need the panel immediately, but I do think it is something that should live in committee and that we should explore. So just wanted to express publicly that you do have my support on that topic.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President. Were there other comments? All right. I am ready to start. They can vote.
So, aye or nay, or
Okay,
that's what you.
that's what I would like to do. So we're talking about math at this particular time. For September, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Oh, that was an aye for, okay. Any nays? Abstention. It carried. Our topic is going to be, mathematics for September. Now we'll entertain October, have moved that off. So is there discussion around, the topics that has been presented that are still remaining for October?
Can you list just the three again?
Yes, I'll list them again. So what's remaining right now is, I think we talked a little bit about special education, and Representative Johnson Law has kind of like moved it down a little way, so we're not gonna be considering it for October. So what we still have is, discipline and safety in schools. And I even believe we've also moved, vouchers to, discussion later after we understand some of the political ramifications and things like that. And possibly use another venue, another tool in our toolbox, as Representative Thompson said. But that, so I really think almost we're talking about, discipline and safety in schools for October is what we have remaining. So it's kind of easy at this particular point. That would be
Really
fine.
like the discipline one. I really like that one. I think we need to dive
Are
into
there any
it.
comments, concerning that? Because that's what it's seeming like that. That's gonna be our October. Budget.
I mean, there's trade-offs here, right? Like, I think, I want to make sure we have a focus for what we're kind of talking about so that it's a very useful time well spent, like, and that we can have, as Director Butler said, a clear plan of action as to like how our role fits into that issue. I also recognize that staff needs time to plan and we want to be able to like kind of get ahead of it with making sure that we have the right people at that. So I just think there's trade-offs there with like, yes, there's benefits to picking an issue and prioritizing it, but at the same time, like, I don't want to jump in too soon and not have a proper focus for how we relate to this issue.
And I agree with you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add that we don't have to have a panel. That is the other question.
Or the options that we can have it and we can decide to take it off. But I understand that this is going to committee first, so after we have discussion in committee and we feel like it's still not ready. And take that off the table, then not have
Yeah.
a topic or a panel for October.
I represented best.
I just want to say that I would support it being, our next topic.
I think we all, and sounds like we're gonna go in that direction, so my point may be point is. The discipline definitely plays a part into everything, it plays a part into math, it plays a part into special education, plays a part into graduation, plays a part into attendance. So I definitely think that there are connections to all of the other issues that we're taking up that start or that can be hindered by discipline or the lack thereof, so. Definitely looking forward to taking this committee first, and then we'll see where we go next.
I like it as an October subject matter. I think that gives us the time to do some of the work that, our Vice President may want to make sure that it's seen and done around it. I think it's very relevant, because I think it's been a hot topic for quite some time that we have not talked about. For both our educators, our parents, for our whole kind of like ecosystem that has had to deal with it because it covers so much ground and has had such a big impact across education as a whole. So, I don't know if anybody else has any comments.
Well, just that you could, again, the committee will meet later this month and then you'll reconvene for the September working session. So could always bring it back and or change it then if you need to. So, yeah.
But as we stand, if I'm understanding, we're gonna take a vote on, discipline and safety in schools as our October, subject matter and voice, so all in favor?
I,
Any nays? One nay would be the Vice President, Williams. Any abstentions?
I mean, sorry, I put it in the chat, but I suggest, I would like to consider it for October, but pending a recommendation from the committee. Like, hopefully in September at the working session, they could come back and say like, to Vice President Williams' point, like, here is how, here's how, what we've uncovered, here's how what we've explored, here's what we recommend exactly around that. I definitely agree with this being something we should consider. But I also heard that like a catch up was going to happen. Um, and I'm wondering if we could make the decision at the next meeting
Really know
instead
that.
of revisiting. I feel like that's kind of, I don't want us to come back and then somebody say, oh, let's pull it. That doesn't feel neat to me.
But couldn't we also just put it on there? Like that's no offense. This is also an intricate and very layered issue. So maybe based on the recommendation
Hey, real
of
quick.
can you hear me?
Real quick, as far as the rhythm of this, we were in the middle of a vote. And I appreciate the comments, but we literally were in the middle of a vote. So with that being said, there was some discussion while we were in vote, actually. So it was aye, nay, abstention.
I'll vote nay, I guess. Um, I'll vote nay. I just wanted to flag because my comments were in before the vote was called. And there was no discussion.
All right, so the vote has been taken, and I believe it carries at the official form. Okay. Thank you for everyone. And we now have our two topics, and there will be follow-up. We take great notes on some of the things that can happen in the coming meeting and in committees. Now, we have an option, but we're moving pretty fast in this agenda today. We do have the option for a quick break. Okay, this is where we are at. Let's get through. I have a person who, you know, loves short meetings, who is pushing the point of not having a break. Our great representative from Ward 2. So if there's no objection to not taking a break, I will entertain it. I don't see any objections to not taking a break, so we're gonna go on through, okay? Now, that being said, this can be very short because I don't think a lot of committees even met in the month of July. So now we're our agenda where we're doing committee reports. So it says educator. Okay, so from what I'm seeing in my notes, that there was one committee meeting that was literally on the last day of July. The Educator X Committee.
Yes.
Is there a report?
We had a panel with experts from other states to learn about what their induction strategies are for new teachers, which was very helpful. So I think our very own Taylor will have a write-up, right, Jen? That we can then look at and learn from together. But some of the ideas, just quoting one is, you know, some states have a formal induction standard, which we don't. And it's an interesting policy led, right? Just, I don't know if the timing is right. So, but more to come from Taylor's report. And I highly recommend some of these conversations that we have at the public meetings with the panels. It actually worked quite well as a smaller group because it was easier for each of us to jump in organically to ask questions.
Thank you, Representative Chen. Any questions, comments, for this committee? I see none. Okay, and the only one that met on the last day of July.
We just give it, even though we didn't. So the College Career and Life Readiness Committee did not meet during the month, but we have been working on the graduation task force composition. So we have received applications that were due mid-July. We got 40 some applications. We are now scoring them. And since we did get the information from Aussie that they're doing the proposed timeline that we notified all the applicants that we will take a little bit longer, but we are at work on putting that task force together.
Thank you. Was there any comments or anything for that? I know for me, I'm just, does this happen prior to that point? Did, Dr. Mitchell put Dr. Jones' name, and there been any kind of like, discussion or
Yeah, she communicated that.
communicated that? Okay, so she, I just want to make sure there was official communication that that was their person to be on task force like that.
And then Representative Thompson might want to add.
Representative Thompson? Your hand raised.
Sorry, it was actually a question for Representative Chang. What for the thank you, Representative Henderson, for just kind of noting our updates. I would only add that Jen, thank you for communicating with the folks who did apply that we are getting to them because there was interest and folks are excited, which is great news about this. Um, for Representative Chang, with the roundtable, what are you all going to do with that information? Like, is teacher induction kind of a big part of what you all are doing for this year?
Decided at the, yes, we decided at the beginning of the year that we would hone in on how the committee, through policy recommendations, insights from experts, public feedback, could help support first-year teachers in our school systems and make sure that we were advocating for policies and programs that did that best.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like kind of toward like the end of the term, like that you all will have some recommendations around. Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Thompson. Any other comments, questions? All right, are there any external committee updates to report that anyone wants to share? Representative Williams.
I'll just note, even though I am no longer the board representative on the Everyday Count Task Force, that they did publish meeting materials for the most recent meeting. So those are on the DME's website, and they do look at the pilot that we have around truancy and absenteeism, along with other recommendations, as well. So if people want to, access them, they are publicly published now.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Was there any other comments for external committees? I know that we're kind of just.
That is, oh, sorry, that's not a legacy hand. It's
Oh, okay, that's new hand. And you're
It's-
exactly where I was about to go to. Go right ahead, Representative Thompson.
no worries. Today, we had our, it's a little off cycle, but our meeting for the Community Schools Advisory, what do we call it? Council. And that was 10 a.m. today. A couple of things that I think are of note to the board. One of the big wins this year is that we were able to secure, I believe it's 2.4 million in community schools funding. Unfortunately, it is 1 year of funding. That is really important because in the past, and I would say more distant past, it seems increasingly distant past, it was recurring multi-year funding. One of the things I actually learned today, we went and looked at the DC code, is that it's actually expected and kind of built in that not only are we doing annual competitions as a responsibility of that group, but that now we set the metrics for what is looked at as successful, and we look at kind of increasing this practice across the district, which makes me think that single year funding is even more kind of problematic than just like yes, this is a good thing that should happen. It actually kind of goes against the way the community schools work is written into the DC code. So we are looking to just do. We also did a bit of a autopsy, if you will, around the advocacy from the past year. But good news in the short term. That is continuation funding. So most of the grantees, if not all of the grantees, will be current grantees, but no new grantees are likely and or expansion through that funding.
Any questions or comments for Representative Thompson on community schools? I just want to congratulate all the lobbyists Representative Thompson and all the folks that she used to work with and the lobbying that went on to make sure that that funding and that it was restored and put back in there after it had not been in there from the mayor's budget, but got put in there during the time of council. Amazing work, you know, and we gotta take those wins when we get those wins, get that W. I just think it was amazing work because it's something that is very relevant to the community, specifically in the community I did. So I just want to congratulate all those. I saw emails flying and asking for people to reach out to individuals, and it worked. And so I just think that's a really, really good job. I want to congratulate the committee. I want to congratulate Representative Thompson and the lobbying and everything that went on for that. I also want to take the opportunity, since we're talking about budgetary type of things that were passed. I also want to say thank you to every single member who reached out, touched, talked to, crafted something concerning the COLA raises for our own staff that we got done. That's an amazing thing. It was overdue, well deserved. It wasn't gonna be in there, then it came back, and so we appreciate that. You know, I especially want to say the wording that, and the work that, our director did when we did do our budget, testimony. And the ability for her to just step to the mic and just blow it out the water, is truly amazing. But to everybody who lobbied, individuals to make sure that our staff, because I know a lot of district government people who have not received COLAs in years, like 5, 6, 7 years, really. And so I think it is no small task that it happened. So thank everyone for that as well. All right, now we're going to turn to our next agenda item, which is retreat planning. Vice President William and I will take turns facilitating this discussion. Members, you have a draft agenda in your materials, and we will also display it on the screen. The main areas of feedback we are looking for are: one, what do you like about the agenda? And what should be changed on the agenda? Okay, and so then taking this, first thing I want to start with is, 7 of the 9 elected members have been through several other retreats, but there's a couple of us who have never been to it. Our 2 members who are, have participated in a retreat. It is essential to us as a board to reflect on the past conversations, that some of us have a little bit more insight than other members, and use them to solidify our next steps together. What this slide presents to us this slide was presented to us in previous retreat in September of 2023 by the executive director of NASB. We want to bring this back for the discussion to show you what we'd like to accomplish at the next retreat. I'm gonna do a little ad lib right now. I know we've had some retreats the interim time, and we didn't come away with all that we wanted. We weren't clear on what our priorities are going to be, framing a lot of things. So this is that opportunity for us to get it done in the sense of coming out of this retreat very clear on what our priorities are and how we're going to frame them, the capacity of our staff, where our focus, our North Star is. We do know there will be other things that come from the side and stuff like that, but coming out of this retreat, we at least want to know where the major work is going to be done and where we're going to be prioritizing our work. With that being said, I'm going to turn to my Vice President, Senator Williams.
Thank you. Yes, so you have the document on the screen, and you also have a document in your folders with the draft goals and outcomes. President Patterson and I, along with Deputy Director Gross and Executive Director Butler, tried to take into account the feedback that people put into planning for the retreat. And so we came up with 3 big topic areas that helped kind of drive like the question, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? So this document that you have in front of you was presented by the head of NASB to help us be able to plan for impact. And so to do that, we want to be able to identify priorities, but also how, like the initiatives of how we are going to achieve those priorities if we're going to be able to get to impact. So what we had heard from feedback was that it's important for us to be able to work well together, to be super collaborative, clearly communicative, So we planned a session to start off around communication styles and also clear communication pathways. The two things and outcomes there are for us to understand better each other's communication styles, but also expectations for communication with leadership so that we can make sure to best advocate for the board as a whole, and then also communication with staff so that we can be efficient in how we go about work together. And then the next session before lunch was around learning from around the federal picture. So in the previous retreat, we talked about how DC is in a unique situation based on the federal context right now. And we wanted to get some expertise from one of the national experts from the Education Commission of the states. We're going to talk about how states are responding to federal threats and concerns. And for us to then think about how do we develop a plan together to align with other relevant DC education partners on these pending concerns as we enter the school year. And then the second piece there was also from a presentation from Paolo and NASB to look at what are the other national trends right now, given all these changes that are happening in education. What are the ones that are relevant for us and what are the ones that are not? And how could we also incorporate that into the session after lunch with choosing our strategic priorities? So I will pass it back to President Patterson for the last part here.
All right. As I stated, at the outset, I'm talking about retreat. In the afternoon after lunch, we're really looking at to kind of define what our legacy is for this particular session of this particular iteration of the board, the members that are currently here. We also understand that there's going to be changes like years coming up. But what do we want to say about this particular session as a board and what we accomplished, what we did, okay? So as I said, the goal is to build a consensus around members on what the board wants to achieve and decide where they want to focus as we continue in the last part of this particular iteration of the State Board of Education. Want members to identify 2 to 4. We thought, anything less than it's not good, but anything more than 4, it kind of gets convoluted and we're all over the place. So 4 is a good number. 3 or 4 is a good number right in there. Priorities for the next 15 months that we have in this iteration of this board. For members to work with the staff to outline intentional actions that they will take for these priorities. So that's what we're going to discuss in the afternoon. As you see, we have quite some time because we know people are very passionate about the things that they want to accomplish and what they want to say, kind of represents them as a member on the State Board of Education. So with that being said, and I'm kind of explaining kind of like what the agenda looks like, we now are kind of like open for discussions about how you guys feel about what the agenda looks like that we kind of put together, the draft of it, where you might want to see some differences or case may be. So discussion.
And there were 2 questions, right? Like generally, what do we like? Any feedback for us so that we can make changes in ample time?
It's so much better than the first one. Thank you. I think clarity of what we're actually trying to achieve and how it's different from just a normal working session is significantly clearer to me. My ask is the last session is 3 hours long. Why were you thinking that it needs to be 3 hours and what are we didn't.
Yeah, we know that people are very passionate about some things and those conversations can drag on as people talk about them. So we want to give enough space in the event that it does go that long. Now, if it wraps up and we add those things beforehand, then it wraps up.
One idea to shorten this is, and also to make this more efficient and less exhausting, because that we're basically doing the heart of this at the end of the day, is for anyone who has a strategic priority for us to consider. And sure, organic things should come up.
That's exactly
To think about it in advance, email it to all of us so we can read. So we're not actually spending the time pitching, but rather actually kind of mapping what makes the most sense. And I don't think that needs 3 hours.
Representative Jack, we love your your dedication to just being effective and efficient and clear, concise. And so we were thinking about what could be like pre-work, so to speak, and definitely love your idea there, okay? Other comment? Y'all are not just gonna let us sit here and say we kind of good, because, you know. I know there's a
Representative
lot of great
Johnson
work
Law
here.
has.
Okay, Johnson Law, I can't see the screen as far as his hand. Johnson Law, is that your hand now?
Yes, Mr. President. I wanted to say thank you to the staff and to the leadership, to you and Vice President Williams. I hear Representative Chang on just, again, making things more efficient, but there are some things we're just gonna have to like really dig into and figure out. And again, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna down this hill. We spent 3 hours in a working session talking about cell phones. So if we can spend 3.5, 4 hours to talk about cell phones, then we can spend time as a board really trying to figure out what all of this stuff means. Because as a new member, a lot of you have been here for a while. And so you all kind of have your own navigation of how all of this works. As a new member, like I have so many questions, and sometimes I just would really like to dig into them with all of you, but we never have real time. And I was hoping we would do that at the first one we had, but it was so short. We spent 3 hours forming committees. And so I do appreciate taking a little extra time to really hash these things out, to really understand the work you all have done as a board before, the work that you all are doing now, how everybody kind of functions and operates, along with everything else that we've mentioned. So as a new member, I say this is helpful and thank you.
Appreciate it. Compliment, and I appreciate your stance on the sense of, as we said at the outset, there are two members that have never done this with us, so this is gonna be new. And we wanna make sure that you get what you need out of it, being a door person, public speak, and like this work, and not get what we needed first time you were in one. So, thank you. Representative,
Can I add one thing there too?
before you go to Thompson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Jones, look, just also like, this is a proposal too, so if there are things that you'd like us to spend particular time on, like, we wanna be intentional with making those decisions and be responsive to what people need. So, if there are particular things that you need, please communicate that with, President Patterson, myself, Deputy Director Briones, and, Director Butler, so that we can consider that as we finalize this.
Thank you.
So much. Appreciate the comments that have been stated. Representative Thompson?
Yeah, I agree with Representative Chang that this is a much improved iteration and is much clearer in what the day could look like and what is hoped to be accomplished. I do have actually a similar question about the 115 to 415 block. And just like not just like, okay, we in the past we have needed more time, but like as the activity is envisioned currently, it would be helpful to understand um, exactly how much time you're thinking it's going to take as constructed, or if you all have like specific questions for, um, you know, this is how we're thinking through it, and is that too long? Because, depending on not just what but the how matters. Um, and so I know that if you tell somebody it's going to be 20 minutes and you get to them in 15, they're happy. But if you get to them in 25, they're less happy. But it is a good chunk of time. And I have also experienced where the time is allotted, but people do drift and just the quality of participation lessens. And this seems to be an important opportunity. So I do want to better understand kind of like if you're just leaving space because you're like it could take 3 hours, or if or and like how you're envisioning using that space. I also want to better understand how the work of the board and any proposals that have come from the committees will fit into framing the section around identity and strategic priorities. Because while I can uh, appreciate that things come up as life happens. That is always true in any iteration of the board and any place else I've ever been in life. Um, I do, when I think of the word like strategic, it's anchored to something. Um, and so I am curious, like what anchors we're using for how we determine what rises to the level of strategic priority here.
And Representative Thompson, I'll try to answer your question as I possibly can. I will state, for everyone's knowledge, is that, former President, Jessica Sutter and the ED from NASB are going to be facilitators, for these blocks. A lot of this, we've allotted time and we're still forming all the things that are going to go in there, is what I would say. But our first iteration was to really focus on what was the goal of each block, what we think was the amount of time that it would be to discuss those blocks. So in responding to your, but I would say that we're still forming a lot of things that you asked in your question, and we appreciate you asking that particular question. But that's where we are right now. That's why we're fitting into the whole group so that they can chime in and say just exactly what you just said, and anyone else. So I appreciate that. Representative Colson.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Right ahead. Okay, hold on one second. Representative
It was
Colson, go ahead,
it was
Papa.
it was two parts. So one was like about the how you all were envisioning the time frames. The other part was like the anchors. Like what are we using? Or are you looking for recommendations around what we should be using around how we envision filtering through which should be strategic priorities? Like, is it things that the committees have elevated? Is it building on some of the topics from our last retreat? Because we did do more than, you know, decide on committees. Like there were things that people say are really important to me, you know, during that time. Like, what are we using to say these are our, like, this is what we would consider strategic?
Representative Wade.
Yeah, so, thanks, Representative Thomas. I think the 3 hour piece, I wanna say first that, to the first part about just the timing, this is still a work in progress and we're still thinking through as best we can. We know that, in past retreats, we've left without answering like what the plan is for particular issues. So the bulk of time in the second half, where it says members work to outline intentional actions, was the hope that we leave the retreat, knowing what what the work could look like. Whether, once we've decided on the issue areas, but that is still, something that needs more definition. I think your question is, if you have thoughts on what could help us, have a lens or a framework for determining strategic priorities, that'd be really helpful. And I'm also open to other members' thoughts on that. I think, because that will help us, be fair and clear as to how we decide our priorities. So I'd like to give you the floor back in just a second for that. The other piece there is just to have, like a focus area, so that like as things come to us in the fall, we already have staff who are developing action items as to how we can campaign and work and message around the things that we are promoting. So that we're being proactive about how we shape the work that we're doing this fall. Do any other members have thoughts about how we should determine what becomes a strategic priority or not? And I think to Representative Chang's point, like, I would like to ask staff to submit those in advance so that we can all be briefed on it ahead of time to make the process more efficient.
Mommy. Got a young kid there.
I mean, my thought is the committee,
Uh-huh.
educator excellence has priority. Like the career has priority. I imagine C has priority.
Right.
That's my first thought, but.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments?
I mean, I largely agree with that, but I don't like to assume. I think that we should revisit what the committees have said are their priorities for the year, to see where there are like, and if there are additions, if there are subtractions, if there are adjustments. But we, our committees both tend to align with what our responsibilities are, and are have captured some of what members have said they want to explore throughout the year. And so um, I would imagine that would be a starting point, not an ending point, but a starting point for um, priorities. But I don't know if that is a shared point of view. I hear Representative Henderson saying that also should be a starting point, but it wasn't clear to me immediately.
I think that can be a starting point and being noted. Others.
In terms of layout and logistics, I would suggest the heavy portion of the day being flipped to perhaps being at the beginning of the day. So in addition to submitting your priorities in advance, and that's already reviewed them, if this is what we're gonna spend, most of our time on, I would just ask them to start there. And then, put everything else in order thereafter.
Noted. Representative Johnson Law.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something, and I also put it in the chat, but I realized I should probably say this out loud. I am one of the members who talked to, when I sent this to leadership and to the staff and to Director Butler, about like the identity of the board. And I'm just going to be candid about this. Like, how do we realistically fit into things? How does this really affect our work, both realistically and honestly, just like politically? And I'm not trying to be mean or funny. I'm at a point where like I'm tired of seeing people playing reindeer games, especially with schools and people's kids and people's children. And as representatives who are elected, like we're not appointed, we're elected. And I feel that is a part of our identity as we work through this system. And I take this job very seriously. Like I really consider that this is God's work, like helping people and really creating change, especially in systems that are very resistant to change. And as I think about those things and as I've joined the board, I'm just trying to figure this all out, especially in these type of times. And so that is one of the reasons, and this is me personally, why I have asked, can we like dig into this realistically, politically, educationally, like really dig into it and have a real candid conversation. And then it's probably not going to be a pretty one, but I think it needs to be had. So that's where I was coming from when I was really trying to figure out the board's identity. Because if someone asked me, well, like, how do you all identify as a board? I would right now, I'd have to say, I don't know. I believe we're all here for children, but I know everyone has different priorities. But like us as a board, there are days I'm just like, I don't know. I know how I feel, and I can speak for LaJoy, but I can't speak for the board. So that's just me personally.
And I can appreciate that. That's why we try to, although we may not use the whole 3 hours on the things that we're discussing, that as we get ready for the retreat, that come up, but yes, I definitely hear you on that aspect, and we do want to come away with that for the next 15 months of what do we look like, what is going to be our identity, what's going to be our legacy. So right now I'm going to go to Representative Butler, and then I'll come back to Representative Thompson to you.
Yeah, I am so happy to be just the
Elevated
director and not a representative.
Director Butler.
So a couple things. I had to step away for a moment, but now I am back. I know there were some questions about the timing and being 3 hours. So there are actual facilitators that we are hiring. They are going to plan out the how. The goal is for the board members to provide like the what. Like they are going to structure and facilitate that so that the outcomes that you all want to achieve are achieved. But like the actual individual exercises and all of those things, we don't have because we are hiring facilitators who are experts at this to do that for you, to help you get to that point. But the goal is that you all come and provide the inputs so that you can get the intended outcome. And I think it's important, like at this point, for you all to agree on what those outcomes will be. Because it's hard to give a facilitator something to work with if you all are not on the same page about what the outcomes are. Um, so I just to sort of have that framing. Um, and I will say every time we've ever done a board retreat, we never finish because people are trying to leave at 1 o'clock because that's the time we've set for it. And we always wish we had longer so that you all can close the loop and like finish the discussions. And so that's why the time that you all agreed to goes until um, that's why there's a bigger block in the afternoon to do that work. So that you all can truly close the loop on it and all be on the same page in terms of consensus. But if there are different outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, I mean, I think that you all still need to agree on those. Um, I think that would be helpful. And I think that from the staff perspective, we don't have a view on what the outcomes you choose. We just want you all to focus on a set of outcomes. So if those outcomes are board identity, if those outcomes are actual defined priority areas with work for the next 15 months, is that a defined legacy, whatever it is, we've just really tried to make sure that you all, everything that you've told us from the sort of topics, there was a definite push. We need to know what are the outcomes that are hopeful. There will also be, the goal is to give you all the pre-work as requested, to be responsive to the needs of the members. So I think it's just really super helpful. It's like, if these are not the outcomes, then what do you want to achieve with the retreat? And so, and tell us so that the board leadership and I can work facilitators to get you all what you want to achieve out of this time together. So if these are not the outcomes, these are not the goals, tell us what they should be replaced with.
Thank you so much, Director Butler. Appreciate that. I did see Representative Thompson's hand, but I think has since been lowered. So I'll take that as some of the things were answered by Director Butler's comment. With that being said, was there anything else that we wanted to discuss as far as the retreat, where we're headed? Again, the emails, also needs to chime in as we continue to do this, but I think from looking around the table, we're good. All right.
Well, I'd like to know just one final thing. So I appreciate Representative Colson weighing in on potentially flipping the order. Do other members feel that that is a better organization of the retreat? Should we move? Because I do understand like not wanting the fear of like wanting to walk out of there and not having clear priorities or clear plans. And we kind of saw things funneling from let's work figuring out communication styles, the national picture, and then into the local picture. So I'm curious if other members could weigh in on which order they prefer and or why.
I was gonna be quiet until.
Yeah.
Well, for two reasons is why I make the suggestion. One, because honestly, I believe this probably will be emotionally heavy and intense in terms of hearing priorities and discussing them and giving opinion. But then also, just if you know what your intent is and your strategies are, then that's going to impact how you communicate and what other parts of the landscape that you look to and you connect with. So I was thinking about starting with our design objective and goal and then working backwards. But most importantly, because I mean, quite honestly, you lose a lot of people after lunch.
Yeah.
Other comments? I know for me, as we were having the time that we had with our deputy director, planning this out, reason that we chose it to be second, because number one, the facilitator, I will say we're gonna have to pay a facilitator for that. We did want to make sure, and I understand people get tired of lunch, and they're ready to go. It's been a long day and everything. But I like this placement because it did allow for us to kind of energize ourselves around those, around the topics of our priorities, our identity and those type of things. So that's the reason I kind of still like it there. I'll leave it there as far as my comments. But I kind of like it there because I know that we're gonna have great facilitation of that. Hopefully, we'll keep the energy as high as we possibly can after what eaten, and it's been a long day. It's a long period. I think we get some of it out, by some of the work that will come on beforehand. But yeah,
And I do have one more question.
sure.
My point of reference is definitely school-based, and so when we plan around strategic goals, we come away with a document in terms of what our goals are, what our next steps are, how we're gonna achieve this, what our benchmarks are, all of those things. Is that the outcome for us, that we will have something similar? I understand that the work that we do is a lot more fluid based on, the needs of our constituents and what's going on, but hopefully there is a document that we can rely on that's gonna anchor us as we move forward. Is that the intent? I hope so. I just want to make sure.
I mean, I guess it's also up to the facilitator, but I think that was sounded like the intention.
That is the intent. That is the intent.
Something, you know, we could post it on the state board website, like something consistently that could be pointed to.
That we can all point to, you know, as we do our committee work and everything that comes before us in the next 15 months. We have something that we would point to saying, these are the priorities that we have, you know, agreed upon or built consensus and not consensus on to move forward with. And that we would have that. We know peripheral things will come, but this is our this is our North Star, and this is the rationale behind it.
Yeah, I like that because, you know, sometimes I think we get into a habit of doing things just to do them.
Right.
Right, and so, I just wanna make sure, I just wanna, you know, double down on. What Representative Colson said, just so that we, you know what our North Star is and we're working towards that. Instead of just, you know, all right, this week, what are we gonna do? All right, I think we should talk about toys, right? You know what I mean? And so,
And I think a lot of that, you know, not to interrupt you, Representative Beth, I think a lot of that, and previously, there was a lot of things that were coming before us, from OPSI. And we were just like going through them, and so we didn't have to really, look at a lot of different things because, you know, it was social studies, financial literacy, it was social emotional learning, and it was just kept coming back to back to back to back. And so we kind of knew what our work was because it was being fed to us by OPSI. Now we're really trying to say, what are those things? Because right now, from OPSI, all we have is the graduation requirements. That's a big ticket thing. So what are the things that we as a board want to be our legacy, the things that we worked on and addressed? That's kind of where we are, because the pace is different.
I think, I think this gives us a really good opportunity to, one, focus on the things that, you know, we have our locus of control over, but also then to actually be proactive, instead of responsive, and look towards, the work that we're doing and how it can impact, students, in the future and things of that nature. So,
I agree, Representative.
cool.
I see Representative Thompson has raised her hand.
Yeah, I think what I am chewing on a bit, like I definitely hear the parts around just like being human and, you know, blocks and during a day and like all of that makes sense to me. Um, I am also wrestling though, and I think I'm having some uh trouble understanding what folks mean by like our board identity and like what we how we figure out what we should be doing. Because at least from my perspective, we do have specific things that we are responsible for. We also, and like you know, yes, we are an elected body. And yes, there are certain things that we have to weigh in on. And those things are actually really clear in statute. And I don't I don't know if we always operate from a place of like, here is what, here are all the things that we could do, here are all the things that we should do, um, here are the things that we must do. And sometimes those things might be things that are timely, and then there might be things that aren't timely. But maybe as part of this activity, we do need to have a focus on everyone like looking again at what we are responsible for, because the board does have an identity. I don't know if we see it as like a shared identity. And then there are things that we might individually, myself included, might be really passionate or interested about, or in that fall outside of that statutory responsibility. Doesn't make them less important. But there is like the reason I ran for the state board is because I understood what the board's um, place was in the education landscape as far as what kids learn. And I care about that. And so yeah, I don't, I worry, not I worry, but like I'm having a bit of a hard time wrestling with the need and what's needed, or like what will help us have like shared clarity. Um, and maybe there are some things that I'm not considering. But I'm having that is I want to share my understanding of that, um, because I don't I do have a little bit of a um, I'm having a hard time understanding like what crafting a board identity means and looks like, um, and how that is needed to do strategic priorities when we already actually have an identity and things that we are responsible for in statute. Um, yeah, like those are actually in my head two different activities.
And what I'll say to that, Representative Thompson, is, duly, I hear you on what you just stated as far as our identity, our statutes and what they say and stuff like that. Uh, and going back to what our goal was for this particular one, which is what, whatever terminology we use, um, I think the major point was to come out of this. The goal is the members to identify 2 to 4 strategic priorities for the next 15 months. And that kind of like, they already said, already tapped somewhat of an identity or how people see us and what it says statutorily. But that will really focus us on the second part of what that says is what will be the legacy of this one. I know when I think about um, my first term and stuff like that, I think one of the biggest things that came out of that, as far as a legacy, was that we redid social studies that hadn't been done in 17 years. And we also did the accountability framework. We redid that. That had a lot of stars about it, took away the stars, and that became kind of like the legacy that we had responded to everyone. So I kind of see this as the same thing, is where what are the things that we're going to make sure that this particular session, we want to call it session or iteration of the State Board of Education before do elections happen and all these things, people move and do what they're going to do, whether they rerun or not, what will be that legacy that this session in the next 18 months be, and we'll be deciding those with, 2 to 4 priorities.
I, I'm trying to I'm choosing my words just because I'm having a hard time, I think, articulating the thought that I have, and or I don't know if it's coming out clear. I think I'm saying that the identity of the board is or maybe identity North Star of the board is set. Like um, we have a set of responsibilities, we have a set of authorities, there it is actually carved out how we fit in the landscape. The what we prioritize and how we go about it are actually things that we can deal with in real time. And so we came on the board at the same time. I think I would actually have a different list as far as like what is our legacy, and those things still would fit in the larger North Star of the board, fit within the statute, and that's okay because something like financial literacy was not fed to us by Aussie. It was something that, you know, a lot of work had to be done to get on the table with Aussie, right? And like there are things, but what we actually take up within that and how we prioritize, I think is what I'm suggesting we should spend our time on. I agree with the identified 2 to 4 strategic priorities. I agree with outlining intentional actions. I think I am having more of a, I'm trying to articulate, especially because Director Butler said our goal for right now is to say what are our shared deliverables and what are our shared goals for the session. And so when I look at this a draft agenda with outcomes, the goal and outcome I think I'm responding to is like board identity, and developing a board identity is separate from in my opinion, strategic priorities. I think we need to understand what our identity already is. And I think our priorities should align to our responsibilities and our authorities, and we should decide what we want to tackle and how we want to do it.
Appreciate that. I think everyone has taken copious notes on the comments that have been, stated thus far. And so those have been taken down. Were there any, other comments that we did? All right. I'm going to move us along, in our agenda. Since we had a very robust conversation on the retreat. And we're now going to move on to business. I would like to ask members, is there anything you'd like to add? That someone would like to add to new business? So I can jot those down.
Yeah, I would like to,
Go right ahead, Rick.
yeah, I would like to add, 2 topics to, new business. One, they're both centered on, AI, artificial intelligence. One is, an AI leadership, collaborative resolution, as well as an AI fluency in schools resolution. My goal would be to, be able to move these to committee. And I can share. Is this when I share about it, or is that for later?
When we get there,
Okay,
I just
cool.
need the name, the title, so to speak. What's the other one?
So one is AI leadership collaborative resolution. The other is AI fluency in schools resolution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there others? All right, thank you. So in the new business, we will, what I have currently, prior to those 2 new ones, is Education Commission state conference report out. We had the NASB conference planning, and then we had the DC State Board of Education expanded authority amendment act of 2025, and now we've added 2 more with 2 AI resolutions, one leadership and one fluency from Representative Best. Are there any others? All right, let's dig in. We'll start with the Education Commission of the State's conference report out. That would be myself, Representative Colson, and Director Butler. I'll start with saying that one of the responsibilities prior to one of the responsibilities of your elected president and State Board of Education is that you become one of the commissioners is documented, and so you become one of the commissioners. And so this is my first time going to ECS. Amazing is what I'll say, to be in a room full of but so smart people and the policy and subject matter. I do hear it was a lot different from people who have attended beforehand, which Director Butler told me. But it was just an amazing time and the subject matter. So I attended mostly everything that was set aside for commissioners and something. Getting the orientation. I attended a lot of the sessions that they had for ECS specifically. I know that they'll speak more so because NASB was also there. So there was some aspects that NASB kind of collaborated with them on and interjected into the conference. But overall, it's more so policy. One of the things that also happened is that I didn't know the agenda beforehand, but the mayor is on the steering committee. So we had to vote for the mayor to be on the steering committee. That was one of the first things I got to do as a new commissioner. So that was really cool. The other commissioners, Dr. Mitchell was there along with Aside. So I sat a lot of sessions with her as commissioner. Got to have a day with our former superintendent, Dr. Grant was also there. She's commissioner because she's now on the Board of Education, I believe, for middle school or something in Massachusetts because they split theirs up. But she was also there. So it was just a great time, what I'll say. Learned a lot, had a great time, kind of like across state subject matters and what they're prioritizing. That was really interesting. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Colson if you want to talk about your experience and yes.
Sure. I'm first grateful for the opportunity to attend. I concur the sessions were wonderful. The one that stood out to me that I really paid attention to most was talking about graduation requirements and what the graduation diploma process looks like, if you will. I would say that the exemplar would be Indiana. I really like their model. They offer seals, which is something that we discussed here. I think it may have been Aussie that mentioned the possibility of using seals with the diploma. And so they offer 3 seals. They offer one, the seal for enrollment, of course, for students who want to go on to higher education. They offer the seal of employment, and then they offer the seal of enlistment for military as well. And so they work backwards, if you will. They talk to some of their industry leaders in their economy, and they say, hey, what do we need to do for our students to make them employable, viable once they graduate? And then they take that information and then use it to create their standards, which I think is very wise, which I really think that we should be doing as well. So I think this model could be used here in some iteration. I've been talking to people, and I know that we are no longer a federal city, if you will, in terms of what it used to look like in terms of our students being able to transition to federal government if they wanted to. And I think we have to look at what else we have here in our economy, in our ecosystem. And I really like the idea of tapping in to the other reserves or other economic bases that we have here in the city, and then using those industries as a guide for our graduation requirements so that we could perhaps do sales as well. But that was my takeaway, and that was my shining moment, was that presentation from Indiana on endorsements.
Thank you so much. And now I'll turn to Director Butler, who also, and you already heard some main things that came out of this sheet. I know she set up some presentations for that. But Director Butler.
Yes, so there were a couple things happening at the same time at the conference. At the beginning was the new member institute. And the new member institute for NASB, I think, was really great for new members to come and hear from other state board members across the country. They did talk about topics and different things. And then the ECS conference, it was almost like the NASB piece was a pre-conference to the ECS conference. And it's really phenomenal. I mean, I like math, but y'all understand how like these sessions were phenomenal. Like understanding numeracy and what that means for a career pathways. Like they were different. And it wasn't just like one state doing certain, like it was the various workshops, and hearing all the different ways in which people are tackling it was really great. But also I think one of the things that stood out was the opportunity. And I will say this, if as board members, like to get to sit and talk and dialogue with other state board members from across the country who are tackling these same issues. I just feel like the value of that cannot be stated enough. Because I know that when we're here in DC, it is definitely our priority. But there is value in learning from others and being in a space where we can learn different things, different ways, and really begin to think about things from different perspectives that we just may not see from just where we sit. So I would say that it was definitely a value add, and I have resources from the conference, books, reports, and I look forward to, being able to share those out um, as soon as we get settled in our new location.
Thank you. Were there any questions, around this subject? It was more so for us to give you a briefing on it. To just let you know that this is a very relevant conference. It's an honor to serve as commissioner. I see it as an honor. But the subject matter that we bring back and the ideas we see them already, bearing fruit, so to speak, because of the subject matters that people want to get into here in the District of Columbia. So it's just an amazing, opportunity. With that being said, I don't see any questions. I'm gonna go to the next, item on our new business, which I'm coming to Director Butler to speak to specifically, is the NASB conference planning. Director Butler.
Thank you so much. And I would ask Jen if you all could share the screen with the,
On it. Thank you.
thank you. So as we are planning for the NASB conference, every year NASB hosts the only conference that is designed specifically for state board members. And so they're bringing together individuals who are doing federal policy overviews and deep dives and answering questions. And they're also bringing together best practices from states and they're sharing conferences. The state board is one of the potential panelists, like the DC State Board is a potential presenter at this year's conference. But this is really an opportunity. And I want to encourage our new members to take advantage of this opportunity. Some of you all have gone before. We do have limited funding. That is just a scenario that is laid out um, for the circumstances from where we are. In past years, we've had more flexibility and more funding. And after talking with President Patterson, so we have funding for up to 5 members to attend. I don't know necessarily like the way I do think, again, we should definitely prioritize people who have never been to a conference in that space. But the final 5, I will leave that decision up to President Patterson. And then if our proposal gets accepted, then we'll be able to also get discounted rates for the staff presenters who will be attending. But what we do know so far about the agenda, because the sessions are not out yet, are the pre-conferences that they've decided on. So there's a high school transformation pre-conference that is on the 27th, which includes a school visit. They do some type of school visit as a part of every NASB pre-conference. There was one connected to ECE work, another connected to just different ones each year, depending on the state that they're in. There's also going to be a specific pre-conference dedicated to education technology / AI in education roundtable, which is specifically a pre-conference for new members and first-time attendees. So, but if anyone has any questions, we will be when I say we, me, President Patterson, Vice President Williams, will be anyone who wants to attend should let us know by Friday so they can have the full list of people because again, we cannot afford to send all members. So,
I thought we talked.
Director Butler, do we need to email you or do we just put it in the chat?
you can email, I would say email all 3 of us so that we all have the same information, board leadership and myself.
Yay.
Okay, thank you.
If there are any questions about like this between NASB and the state board's budget, like the expenses are covered. So we're not asking people to like come out of pocket or anything, but we also just don't have a ton of money to send like the full board. So
I do want to give Director Butler the team, a lot of credit for working through this. As you know, our budgets have been, kind of held up, for various reasons, let's do what they work overtime to make sure that we can do this, in a timely manner where we can get discounts and those type of things. But we appreciate you, trying to hit the deadlines that we're trying to beat right now. All right, thank you. We're gonna move to the next one, in new business, which is the DC State Board of Education Expanded Authority Amendment Act of 2025. Last month, Representative Goulet mentioned that he would like to bring this legislation back at the August public meeting. He will make a motion at the public meeting to place the legislation back on the agenda. Remember, we kind of just tabled it. It didn't go away. We didn't vote on it or anything like that, but it was in the process. In the meantime, we wanted to open it up for any final discussions this evening. And with that, I'm open to hearing any kind of comments about it or anything that may be needed to talk about, as we consider this, because it will be on the agenda next, in our public meeting. So that being said, I'm entertaining questions or comments.
I can start. So, yeah, I think, just to frame this for us, right, this is work that the board has done over many years, and it's work that, we've already, created recommendations. This is just like communicating those recommendations to council to be able to act on them, and we've already, communicated and passed our resolution. I am in full support of the substance of some of these things, and and I also think that there's one piece that is missing that could help us create a better education system if we were to amend it. So for instance, right now, the original State Board of Education governance report said that we should have the power to amend any of the policies that OSSI gives us. So right now, we can only vote up or we can vote down. We cannot, like, for instance, if Representative Johnson Law, if they gave us a set of graduation requirements that didn't have an additional pathway to a diploma for students with special education needs, we couldn't change that. I think simply put, like, we we're voted by our residents and constituents to be able to best represent them. And this was a power that the previous board said that we should already have. It's currently missing in this legislation. So I'd like for us to consider how whether or not we should think about adding that before our vote in 2 weeks.
And as the Vice President Williams talked about this currently, the dynamics that they present, some of them people voted up or down. I've had those discussions sometimes behind the scenes with people like, well, either you're gonna vote it up or you're gonna vote it down. You be stuck with what you have, as opposed to being able to add something to it or suggest something to it. And we do understand that, a lot of debate goes into it and everything like that. But once they get to a presentation period, and they said, this is it, all we can do is vote it up or down. And we know the consequences of each of those. So I just wanted to add that to it. And that's what Vice President Williams is kind of speaking to. Representative Henderson, I see.
Yeah, I just want to say for context, so this legislation came out of the working group on
Yes.
board authorities, and so what it reflects is what the three of us on that working group were able to agree on, and this is an aspect of it that we discussed and did not include that, but now that it comes to the full board, of course, the full board needs to weigh in on how they feel. I can say that I am personally in support of the ability of the board to amend OSSI's proposals. I won't speak for him, but I will say that Representative Ray made other arguments in the working group, so I just want to note that he's not here, and I want him to have a chance to say what he wants to say, because he's not here. But for myself, I can say I do favor us changing this proposal to include that, right?
Do you remember what the rationale of the committee was for where you landed?
I don't feel comfortable, characterizing what other people said, I just don't remember well enough, the meetings are recorded, I believe, so.
I'm looking through
we
the
can definitely
notes
come
and
back to it.
I don't. see-
Yeah,
That's why.
I think one thing, and yeah, I think we could go back and look at those notes, but I think one was just being careful of abuses of future boards and just making sure that board members are not misconstruing like what OSSI as a state education agency is able to do and not able to do. And so by amending it, it could put a constraint that they're not able to fulfill through that amendment. So there was just one concern that came up.
If I believe I saw the sequence right, I believe Johnson Law is next in the queue and then, Representative Thomas.
And sorry, guys, it's dinner time and Bria and her friend are here, so you're probably gonna hear Iron Man and a couple of other characters. But really quick, I had a question about the enforcement timelines, specifically around like, I guess like the year. Like, can anybody explain why is it a year? Like, how is a year determined? Like when we're talking about like enforcement, I guess, of a policy action. Does anybody have any clarity on that?
Both Robert and, excuse me, both Representative Henderson and Representative Thompson and Representative Goulet, um, plus Darren and myself were on that committee, but I would, leave that up to the two representatives who are here to answer first.
So what we were trying to build in, reasonable times for OSSI to respond. And we debated, you know, what that could be. It's a little tricky with, I think what we did was we kind of experimentally modeled with like a big project with something big like social studies standards or graduation requirements. We're trying to figure out a timeline that would allow for OSSI to do the work that they would need to do to respond to a request that we made. I will just add, like, that was really tricky, like, wasn't clear, you know, to us, and I think it is pretty conservative, so I would understand if somebody thought, well, that's way too long. But we were trying to be, I think we did err on the conservative side of trying to make sure OSSI would have time to do whatever work we were asking them.
Yeah, I mean, so I would note a couple things. Uh, I believe, I don't know who said the meetings are recorded. They are, and can be accessed. All of our reports are also posted, and each one does include key highlights as we were having the discussions for each recommendation. So I was trying to go back month by month and look at our discussions and takeaways because I was trying to more clearly remember about the amendment because I know we discussed that at length. I will say for the timeline, and again, I'm trying to go back to the reports. That's also something we did a bit of like projection and modeling. I think a few things are assumed here. One is that at any point, the board could initiate there's no how do I put this cap on the amount of things the board could initiate. So like let's say as a board we voted to initiate 10 things. And all 10 things, if we did a timeline of OSSI has to do it in a month or something, that would be absolutely impossible. So not having an idea of what this could be like, how many things would bring up. The goal is not to have it always take a year, but to allow a certain amount of time to consider and also work it into whatever work is on people's you know, plates at any given time. And so I would like a bit more time to go through the notes. I would also encourage folks to go through the notes and the recommendations. It does also have a clause that if OSSI does not initiate the process in a year, that what we could do about it. And we did talk about if we should limit the number of things that the board could initiate in a year. Like, let's say we wanted to have a faster timeline. Maybe a compromise might be that we wouldn't send more than a certain amount of things because we were trying to be both um, proactive in why we would need to do this and thoughtful about how to actually make the things happen and good. Because it's great to say like, oh yeah, we told Aussie to do something. It is better to say we actually got something done alongside Aussie. As far as the amendments, and I see Representative Goulet, or the ability to amend, Representative Goulet has logged on. And if he remembers more clearly, I'm happy to share the space and um, let him respond since he brought it back up. I am happy that we did bring this back up, but we did discuss the amendment portion in length. I think we also assumed that if some of the other things, if I'm remembering correctly, if some of the other things were true, like the ability to initiate, um, and yeah, like the ability to initiate, that it would also mean that unlike with the accountability recommendation, which went unchanged for years and years and years, we wouldn't have to always like go to the mat with Aussie on every single thing. And there were other things that we could do that don't currently exist now.
Thank you, Representative Thompson.
Yeah.
I do want to, as you just mentioned, give space, because this name has been mentioned many times during this discussion today. Representative Goulet, before you're able.
Thank you. And my apologies to everybody for getting on late. I had some reception issues. I had hoped to join at 5 o'clock. So I'm sorry I'm jumping in the middle of this conversation. But it sounds like we're discussing the proposal to transmit legislation to council, which would allow us to initiate proposals and then request data as a board, which I definitely support. I had some concern about it earlier, but I think the need for it really in recent months has become clear. And I don't really see the problems of congressional intervention, which is my big concern with this. I think there was some suggestions that this was a power grab, but I think we've restrained ourselves. I believe, Representative Thompson was talking about, how we weren't going to try to initiate policy through amendments. We were going to try to have a formal process for initiating policy. And I think that's the right way to go with it. And I support really the work that she, myself, and then Representative Henderson put forward as a committee. I think as a committee, we really put forth a proposal that made sense. I was just being, I think, overly cautious about it at the time, but I think the need for it is clear. We need to be able to get data and then be able to react to situations in a real-time fashion, which, clearly we've not been able to do, on a very important issue, which is this kindergarten issue. So I will, I will be glad to answer questions if there's questions on the floor. I apologize that I'm coming into the conversation midstream.
And
And so,
Vice President Williams wants to go real quick. You want to?
Yeah, Director Bradley, if you have you can go and then I can jump in after you.
yeah, mine is more of a process thing. So, at this point, because the legislation is on the table, you all already voted at last working session that it can be brought off the table at the next public meeting. So that's not that you all have already approved that action. So that is what will happen. And because it's legislation, and it was laid on the table as such, it cannot be amended before it is taken off the table. So you all have to, like, if you want to make an amendment, you would need to make that any changes to the legislation during the meeting. And, the staff has a form, so you can prepare amendments and we can get them all on the record and that kind of thing. But just in terms of process, is that what you also understand, Representative Goulet?
It is, and I would be happy to if there are members who would like to discuss amendments such as our power to do amendments to OSSI resolutions. I would want to first speak with, our president, with Representative Thompson and Representative Henderson, who we worked on this proposal together with. But, I would be open to thinking about that as a possibility, but I want to have a discussion with my colleagues on it. So, yeah, if that's something that people would like to do, I'm all for that. I think we need to look generally at governance based on just, what I've seen as a systemic failure by DCPS and then just oversight not being able to pick up for that. So I think we've got to rethink a lot of things in the coming months based on what's happened. So I'm glad to have that conversation with anybody who wants to consider whether amendments are the right way to go. But I would want to have it first with the members of the committee that worked really hard on this, and then with our president.
In agreement with you, and I want to thank Director Butler because she basically took the words out of my mouth as far as our parliamentarian of how this would go and if there were going to be amendments and how that worked. So thank you, Director Butler, for stating what's the process as we bring this up in our work committee. Vice President Williams.
Yeah, I'll jump in and connect, what you had said, Executive Director Butler, and respond to, what you were saying, Representative Goulet. So first off, thank you. I appreciate all the work that you and the committee did on this. I think it's a very important piece of, work, and I had brought up before you had logged on the idea of reconsidering whether it shouldn't be an either or in our ability to initiate policy or amend policy, but a both and. And I said that for two reasons. One, because it was a part of our original governance recommendations in 2023 to have both authorities. And we are the public's voice, as you know, in being able to effectuate change and to be able to get things done. And I think we're in a very different place right now than we have been previously, and to really be able to do our job on behalf of district residents, we need both authorities. Still within our statutory authority, not any new issues, right? It's still a very marginal change. We're not looking at having oversight over schools. We're not looking at opening and closing schools. We're not looking at any day-to-day functions within schools. We're looking on staying within our lane in the district, but also being able to ensure that there is accountability in the system in our ability to not just vote up and down, but to actually amend and change things as well.
Thank you, Vice President. Any other comments?
Do we have support for this from City Council?
That's an interesting question. I know there has been similar legislation that has been put forth by Representative Parker from Ward 5. Ours is a little bit more as a pipeline, things like that. Major differences between the two legislations. It would be interesting I've heard comments prior to this. Some support, some not. So we would have to say, but there is some support. I would say that I won't go into names or anything like that, but I had a conversation with people. It does have support.
And I would add on that to say that the legislation proposed already last year by Councilmember Parker said that he has consulted with the state board leadership, Superintendent Mitchell, council member chairman, and a range of education stakeholders in crafting his bill. This idea also came after conversations between state board leadership and Chairman Bengals.
That was last year.
That was last year.
I think a lot of the dynamics have changed also. That as Representative Goulet stated, that gives it even more consideration at this time. So, all right. Thanks everyone for the conversation around that. With that being the ones that were already on, and I'm going to turn to the two new items, and I'm coming to Representative Best from Ward 6 to do the next two items.
So back in 2023, I guess, when I first got on the board, one of the first topics that I brought to this board was that of artificial intelligence and the role that it plays and should play in the education of our youth. We were able to come up with a resolution where we stated our priorities, but outside of that, no formal movement has really been been made. We had attempted to do some work with the DME, and had a couple conversations with OSI, but really nothing really materialized. Since then, AI has grown at such a rapid pace that I fear that we have fallen incredibly behind as we start to think about what role we should be playing. And it seems like still there's no movement to even really acknowledge its presence. With that being said, I, want to make sure that we can do something tangible where we can start to move the needle, where there is some type of accountability that is attached to it. For me, I believe if you want to get something done, you often have to have top down and bottom up. And so my goal was to approach this in such a manner. So I am proposing an AI leadership collaborative resolution in which the Deputy Mayor for Education and OSI would jointly work together to launch this professional development for our leaders, so that our leaders could start to figure out the best ways that they can start to implement AI, to implement this stuff in our schools. And when I say implement, I'm not just talking about teaching like how to use AI or things like that, but I'm also talking about how to differentiate between like the deep fakes and stuff like that. All of these things that are coming at us really, really fast. I got this idea actually at my day job. At my day job, I get an opportunity to connect with people across the United States and see what they're doing. Texas has done a really good job with this collaborative and kind of using that as a model. And so my goal would be for DME to provide the strategic alignment and cross-sector coordination, as well as have OSI lead the program execution with professional learning and curriculum integration. And so that would be the first one.
Hold on,
Yeah.
I want to that one. Is there any questions on the first resolution that he is proposing?
So I guess my first resolution is, what is the point of the resolution? Because resolutions have no power. We can't make the DME do anything. So like, is it a better track to ask them to like, and it like, I just don't know what the resolution, I get the purpose of the resolution. That is very clear, and that's not what I don't understand. But I'm just like, we have no oversight or anything over the DME. We have no advisory powers over the DME. Like us putting out a resolution saying what the DME will do.
Yeah.
I just
So
don't know how that moves us towards the DME actually doing it.
Can I join add a comment to that?
Absolutely. That was my question.
Yeah, so by no means am I saying you better do this, right? But what I am saying is back in 2023, we did ask for collaboration, and there was no movement on that at all. And I'm saying at least if we can put it down on paper and say, like, we believe that this approach is right. And, we will work with you to make it happen. Like, I have no problem working with them every step of the way to make this thing happen. I will even take the lead on it. But I am saying that, like, I see that this is a good approach, and I would like to do that work with them. Now, I'm just formalizing it right now, as opposed to doing what we did back in 2023, when I think I don't want to say we were ahead of the ball, but we were right on target at the time. Right now, we are far behind. And I think that when we are saying like, oh yeah, let's ask. Yeah, cool. I don't have a problem with that. We can ask as well. And I guess the question is, why not ask first? And maybe I'm not, going about it the right way. Who knows? But I guess I'm at a spot right now where I fear that we have done nothing. And that was the very first thing that I brought up in 2023. And so what I am trying to do right now is provide an avenue or at least an approach or a strategy that says, hey, you don't have to come up with the ideas. We can come up with some of those ideas, and then we can work on getting this to happen. And so for me, I'm just not in a space right now where I don't want to actually share like what those things could be, and not have it formalized.
Thank you for that clarification. I believe Representative Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Representative West and Director Butler. I think that, part of the way that I see, us as the identity of our board is recommending state level things that need to be taken up to the proper education agencies to be able to implement it. So I think having a clear stance as a board that we are supportive of this as something that needs action, could then allow for us to lobby and encourage the necessary body to be able to come up with a plan. And it's not maybe something that we need to come up with ourselves, that's not necessarily our role, but it is our role to endorse that something should be done and then to be able to advocate for it.
Yeah.
So you have my support, Representative Best. I think that it'd be great, just in terms of the proper channels, if we see it appropriate to put this in a committee, draft it, get the support, and then to move it along.
Yeah,
And following on what Vice President Williams just said, I also support this. I think it is one of our jobs. We are the voice for education for the constituents that elect us to these positions, is to raise those issues, to put some kind of formulation about how we want to have these discussions. And I think one of those vehicles are our resolutions as we elevate that and kind of frame those discussions of how they will be. We cannot tell anybody what to do or what they will not do.
Yeah.
But in the sense of, you know, who we are, who we're and who elects us to our positions, we do have a responsibility to try to look forward, be proactive if we can be, and then elevate those concerns. And this is a great vehicle. So you have my support as well on this.
I guess I want to say, and I'm speaking for myself. I'm not gonna speak for anyone else here. For us to be at a space right now where we are on the DC State Board of Education in the midst of an AI revolution, and for us to do nothing on it would be an absolute failure on our behalf, not just here, but as a city as a whole. And so if it takes us to recommend it for the ball to get moving, then by all means, that's what we should do. Now, I'm not saying that we're telling you, you better do this, but we're saying like, yo, I think that we really need to focus in on this. And so I can leave it at that. I don't want to go too deep.
And we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of stuff that's going on, the atmosphere there, but I still think we need to take care of those things and address those issues that are right in front of us.
And I'll also go on record and say, like, I have no problem fully like taking on like what that leadership looks like from our end without the support of staff or anything else. Like, I know we have a lot of people who are doing a lot of different things, but whatever it takes is right now is what I'm saying. And I just feel like this issue is so big, and I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
And before I go to Representative Henderson, if I can feed him with a comment, I see the process spraying, so to speak. I do want to ask you real quick, what committee, if we were to move this resolution, are you suggesting that it goes?
I don't know. I guess it could go on under a couple of them, to be honest with you. I don't know. I'll come back
We
to
get
it.
ready to
Yeah.
come back to it.
Yeah.
Please get that spot. Representative Henderson.
Yeah, I just want to say, Representative Best, that from my view, you've already done the ask them and encourage them to take this up. When you brought this to the board, I think we encouraged you to go to DME, go to Aussie, have those conversations. You did. We passed a resolution, more encouragement, and like you said, nothing has happened, and I'm frankly dismayed that there's no statewide guidance on AI. We know that other states are doing it. And I think at the moment, we're leaving LEAs, schools, teachers to figure it out on their own. I do think it's important that there's state level leadership on this. I appreciate you bringing it back to us and bringing it back to the attention of the state agencies. I mean, I would say, like, you better do something about this. Like, you have to do something about this. So I fully support that.
Dr. Buttersecker. Yes, and I think, in one moment before you do go, I do have to let Representative Thompson, because she had her hand raised, and I don't want to skip over and acknowledge her. Representative Thompson?
No, if Representative Chang was going to respond, I'm happy to
Okay.
defer to him and then
I
jump in.
think my ask is in agreement, yeah, that if the committee is taking this on, which I hope it does, we're not just workshopping the resolutions, but I do think that the next step first is or the first step is just checking in to see, because we are there's so many different parts of our government and so many different people. My understanding is that someone is already working on this. And so figuring out who is already doing this before we say nothing has happened. I understand that there is a statewide policy, but just making sure that we don't put something forward without having done our homework. That's my ask.
Yeah,
I do
I'm
believe that can be worked out with me.
I'm open with that as well. But I will add that nothing was done when we asked. And it's 2 years later, and still there's nothing that's tangible that's out there. And so, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just checking in to see who at the DME, who at OSSI is working on this, which charters are already taking a lead on this on their own, right? I think there's,
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge. Like there are a lot of people doing things on their own. And there's no like who is responsible, right? Like who is responsible for the implementation of all of this throughout our schools? Is it gonna be OSSI? Is it gonna be DME? Who is responsible for ensuring that our school leaders have the tools that they need, or that our teachers have the tools that they need to appropriately educate our youth as it relates to some of this stuff? And right now, that's the stuff that I think is missing right now. Like, I don't think that there is that proper. And if it is, it has not been expressed or shared out widely. And so we're here. It's another school year, and I think that we cannot wait to figure out like who is going to do. We need to start holding everyone accountable for this. And no, we can't hold them accountable, but we can start to make those recommendations. As you know. And if we don't want to do that, then we should.
you can't formally, Brendan, but we can if you're willing to put the time in,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you both. Representative Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, I had a feeling some of the questions Representative Chang were going to go that way. I think they're important questions. Like, I don't I don't receive anyone saying that we're where we needs that anyone is saying that we are where we need to be on this. I do think in order to actually uh, see what you are describing, Representative Best, some of the steps that Representative Chang is describing are necessary steps. And I think we saw that with like the literacy recommendations. And while I am not opposed to a resolution, and I think that if it came before the board, most people would be willing to pass a resolution. I do think what you're saying around actually having the guidance is a lot more important. And so I would recommend that the committee does take this up. I would also recommend that maybe we can start to outline and research what some best practices might be. And I will recommend maybe connecting with Representative Chang. I'm also happy to participate and have conversations with you about what do the conversations look like when you are trying to get an agency to pick something up. Because while I can appreciate it's been a certain period of time, I would also add that during that time, we do have a different superintendent. We also didn't have a superintendent for a period of time, and the decision makers and the players change. And so While it is not a perfect storm, it is a different storm that we're navigating, which could mean a different opportunity to get things done. But I would encourage, in addition to a resolution and putting together the thoughts on what we want to see, some interagency conversations to understand what is currently happening and kind of make the ground a little more fertile so things can move forward.
So, Representative Thompson, thank you for that. I do want to also push back that that was my goal back in 2023. I was seeking for us to get interagency conversations to determine what's currently being happening, what's currently happening, who is in charge of what. The goal was also to share best practices and things of that nature. So everything that you're sharing is exactly what I approached the DME with, which they said they were, in favor of. It just never happened. And there were
If it's
several
okay,
times.
if it's
Yeah.
okay to interject, and maybe I should say this just by itself, because I do think it matters. When those conversations were happening, we had a different superintendent. That superintendent said, we are doing X, Y, and Z. We will not move if certain things happen, right? Like she had very specific, things that she made decisions about, and she's no longer here. And so I'm not saying,
Alex wasn't with anything that took place with Ozzy, if I want to be clear.
so we should
So
maybe we should talk about this offline. But
it's fine.
I think I am highlighting a point of optimism is that we actually have a new player who might be on the same page as you. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do a resolution or we shouldn't do any of the things, but I'm saying we should explore that opportunity since there's a new person at the table that wasn't at the table when those things were happening.
And one of the close comments, Representative Chang.
Representative Vestek, what I hear in what Representative Thompson is saying is not a critique so much as a, hey, if we passed a resolution before and it didn't work, what's going to make this one different? And so more of a diagnosis of like where it fell,
Yeah.
what we can do differently this time, so that if we do something, it actually.
I love that. And I think the difference also was my goal originally was a more comprehensive resolution, but I was asked to create one on priorities and then connect with all the different agencies so that we could create a different one and then hopefully pass some type of, work to get some type of policies in order. And that's what I did. And so that's why we only have a priorities resolution. And that priorities resolution also doesn't address like who could do what. And so I think by also attaching like, hey, like, I think that once again, we can't hold anyone accountable. But if we say, hey, this would be like a really good idea, and we are actually proactive with it, even though we're not proactive anymore. But saying that like, hey, we believe that DME could cover this or OSSI could cover this, like by just developing a framework where we're actually attaching people's names or duties to like these roles, then I think that that's a lot different than saying we have a priority of making sure that students, it wasn't really tangible.
I'd be less optimistic than Representative Thompson there, because I don't think that that'll move it forward either. So let's talk offline.
And what I'll say is I appreciate the conversation that we've had around it. I love the metaphor that Representative Thompson gave us, is that may not have a perfect storm, but we have a different storm. And so with that being said, I'm going to recommend that we send it to the CCLR committee so that these conversations and some of these ideas and things like that can continue.
And my last thing is, if our outside of our core responsibilities, if our main role here is to make recommendations educational recommendations, and we're saying that, you know, recommendations aren't really the avenue, then I do question what I'm still doing here.
But we don't want you to have that question, so we're gonna get there.
Just a thought.
And I gotta come back to you.
Yeah, we're going to, the next one
First
was.
Yeah. Oh, not as long for the debate, but now we're doing fluency.
Yeah, the next one was the AI fluency and schools resolution. The second one would basically ask OSSI to define AI fluency, support teacher training, and develop grade band aligned learning goals across four critical domains. Foundational concepts of AI, digital literacy and data skills, ethics and civic responsibility, and creative and career applications. Obviously, these are things that I'm thinking of, but at the end of the day, I want to send it to committee so I can make sure we're doing it the just right way. But I do want to make sure that we're also saying, like, what is this? And that we're supporting our teachers so that they can that they can actually fully implement. And that we have some type of grade band aligned learning goals across some domains. I do, worry sometimes when I do believe that these can go into existing, whether it's standards or different criteria. I do think that there are ways that it can fit in there, but I feel like we need to call it out. Because I think far too often, we get stuck with, oh yeah, there's like critical thinking skills that they do in, sixth grade. That should be able to help, but it's like, it's not tangible, it's like abstract. And so I'm actually calling on us to make it less abstract and make it more real.
All right, was there discussion on the second resolution that's being proposed, or make a recommendation to send it to CC?
And I'm sorry, before that, last thing,
Okay.
and I just want to make it clear, the first one that I was offering was professional development. Like, I want to make sure that everyone understands what I'm asking for. It's a professional development and training for our school leaders so that they can help understand how to implement that. I don't even think that should be something that we should even be arguing. That is basic, like bottom level. And then the next part is this what I just shared. So we can call on that word. Okay, sorry about that. It's really
I'm
passionate.
recommending the vote to be allowed. They take on that recommendation. Okay, that's most of the new business, but I do have, I did see one last thing, so I'm going to give a representative from Ward 3, Eric Goulet, I'm going to kind of give a very brief kind of update.
Oh, thank you. And I was glad to either do this now or doing during the portion of the agenda that was announcements. But I wanted to update everybody on the kindergarten issue that we've been tracking. I think the board's really done an exceptional job trying to advocate for these families. And the result really right now is in a very disappointing and disturbing place. So we met with council. Had some great meetings, met with Councilmember Parker, met with Councilmember Robert White, and really seemed to be gaining some traction. Chairman Mendelson, along with Council Members Pinto and Fruman, sent a letter to the Chancellor and the Deputy Mayor. And the response was from them that they were going to create a process by which they were going to evaluate students prior to the start of the school year, which was a big issue for us, is that we felt like having students begin the year and then be demoted would be very harmful to their mental health and their academic development. So DCPS agreed to create a process and agreed to do testing. And they tested the students. And not surprisingly, since these students had been held back, had not had an opportunity to attend kindergarten, they didn't have the proficiency. The students, in many cases, failed the exams. What happened after that is even though the students were found not to be proficient by DCPS's own exams, they were told they had to attend first grade anyway and have still been ordered to skip kindergarten. So I'm going to talk to members individually, send an update. I'm still trying to get all the results back from the families to see who's been exactly told what, based on the student results from the tests. But the whole thing was just basically done to, I think, get council not to move our legislation and to delay it past the end of the council session into recess so that no action could be taken. And then the process of testing families, I mean, just appears to have been for nothing because when the students failed the tests, they were sent to first grade anyway. So I think we really need to take serious action on this. I've lost all confidence in Chancellor Farabee to act as chancellor at this point in a fair and reasonable way. I think this is just really, uh, I mean, it's been despicable the way these families have been treated, and I intend to do something about it when I get back. And I will call each of the members and see what they're willing to do as well. But I am rethinking everything from governance to how we interact with the chancellor, because I don't think this has been handled in a way that anyone feels is acceptable. So that's everything, and I'm glad to answer questions about it, but I will send an update to members about the issue once I get all the data from the families.
What I'll say, did you have something, Vice President?
No, I wanted to say briefly, yes, that, I appreciate the update, and Representative Goulet, you've been working very, intently on this for a while now, and, I appreciate how you've been able to loop the board in. I would just encourage you as best you're able to continue to give us information that you have in a timely way. So because this has gotten some national news, this has gotten local news, like, this is being brought up in different forums, and I just want you to help us be informed as best you can, given the role you're playing. So as soon as you're able to communicate the current situation, I would greatly appreciate reading something from you.
Yeah.
And what I'll say is real quick, so we can keep the move is, Representative Goulet, I appreciate the work that you put into this, and the dedication and your advocacy on behalf of the families that are affected and how it's expanded over the course of time. I too, as I talked to Vice President Williams, have seen it on my news channel that I watched for the last couple of days. Different interviews from two different stations that I watch in the mornings. And so I know how much it's been elevated. And now that it's on a different plane as far as people who are in the discussion and talk about it. Again, I appreciate your charge that you've taken on this. I look forward to further discussions about what you mean by what actions you would like the board to take in further action. Because I know a number of things have happened. So I look forward to hearing what those actions seem like, what fall within our statute, and how that looks, is what I'm saying going forward.
I mean, just to respond to both of you, if you don't mind, President Patterson. I mean, I think the challenge for me is, as I sit here and think about this, I think the board within its powers has done everything it can do. I think we have been on top of this issue from the moment it was brought to us. I think we have taken action to pass a resolution and introduce legislation to the body that is charged with oversight over this issue. And I've seen a lot of the articles. I saw the WJLA article. And it really is just cast our schools in a very negative light. I cannot say that I have any confidence in the current leadership of DCPS after the way they've treated these families. And that is extremely concerning to me. I will talk to members about it, but I think we need to, in the fall, take an active role in holding the chancellor accountable for the way he has handled this situation. And that will be with the media. And I will be glad to give an update to individuals as I learn information on this. I had hoped we had reached finally a resolution. I think the council stepped in and provided helpful guidance with the letter, and it seemed like there was a process in place that would finally help these families get to the right place, and all of this could be in the rearview mirror for the fall. But that has not happened, and it has been a deliberately I mean, I wouldn't call it deceptive without proof. It was deception, but it was a bait and switch, I feel, on the families to basically run out the clock on the legislation, to then put them through a process which was a sham, and then tell them all they had to go to kindergarten, or they had to skip kindergarten and go to first grade, even though these students failed the proficiency tests. It's simply appalling. So I will leave it there. I'll be glad to talk to my colleagues about this further, but it deserves national headlines, and we need to stay on top of this as best we can.
You would do another portion of the conversation. If there's no further questions for Representative Goulet on the subject, I will move us along in the agenda. And I know this may be a favorite part for some people in the agenda, after a long day of work and everything like that. So, I want to, we're moving to adjourn. So I want to thank the members for your time and engagement tonight. The state board is back to our regular cadence of meetings, after having that nice little break for a month in July. So we will next convene at the public meeting on August 20th, 2025. The title of our expert panel will be "What Do Graduates Need Today?" Members of the public can sign up to testify at sboe.dc.gov. Seeing no further business before the state board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
It has been moved. I'm gonna take a move by Representative Henderson. I'm gonna take, is that a second by Johnson Law?
Second.
Okay, it's properly been moved in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It is moved. We are now adjourned.
Man, I just want to hang out with you.
Good night, everyone.
Hi, everyone. See you.
Good job, you guys.
I'll take a ride if you're going there.
So.
I just responded. I'm on Connecticut.